Welcome to the May 14th, 2024 City Council Work Session. I'd now like to turn it over to City Manager Benda to walk us through the agenda overview.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Today, for work session, we have, by way of invitation, Lynchburg City Schools. Welcome down here to City Council chambers. Glad that you're here. They're going to walk you through a major classification funding for fiscal 2024. That's something that you've been talking about and had some questions, and they very kindly have come down here to kind of help brief in advance of this evening's vote. Also in the work session, just kind of an update from Rachel Freshheisen, who now has a full nameplate. We're excited for her. She's going to tell you, each one of you have been interviewed by a group, kind of where we're headed and what we're going to do. She's just going to give you a quick update. And then business item briefings are those things that, in fact, were branded by Dr. Wodeka. Thank you, Dr. Wodeka. And the idea here is that we brief you, get you a chance to kind of suss out some different things so that when you come back to vote on it, you'll have asked all the questions and gotten all the answers we hope that we can get you. And with that, Madam Mayor, turn it back to you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, moving on to work session agenda item number 1, request to amend the Lynchburg City Schools major classification funding for fiscal year 2024. Dr. Crystal Edwards.
I think so. Is it clicked on? Oh, we'll click. Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Thank you for having us here, members of council. Have part of my team here, Miss Sonia Jammies, who is our CFO. She's going to tag team a little bit of this with me. And again, we just want to take you through our request for contingency. So I'll get started, and then at the end, if there's still questions, I'll take any questions you may have. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So just a little history and more for viewing public in terms of where we are and where we've been. And I have somewhat of a comparison of last year's operating budget and this year's operating budget. What looks different between the years besides the amount, and one being that contingency reserve. Also differences in ADM from last year to this year. Our ADM did go down about 1%. And we're using since it's after March 31st and we submitted our spring student record count, SRC. Generally, that is the one that they use to do the funding. We have to do that again at the end of the year, but we use that number for purposes of this discussion. And also just looking at the difference between the city revenue from last year to this year. The revenue is down by 9%, and I will clarify that by saying the usable revenue to do the budget because the contingency was set aside. Why are we here? And you all have my letter, City Manager, in terms of what happened this year. There are 4 major things that are going on that influence our decision to ask for the remaining contingency reserve. The biggest one is the change in the sales tax and in the grocery tax. Both were reduced by the state between the time we adopted our budget and March. And then over the course of the year, we've seen some increases in both health insurance claims, because we're self-insured, and Ms. Jamies will talk a little bit about that, and utilities. So those 4 things pretty much add up to the reason why we're here and we made the request. And just to make it a little clearer, especially for our viewing audience who may not understand all of the things, again, we adopted our budget in June of 2023, and now we're here at March of 2024, and the revenue from the state has gone down since being adopted. In between that time, as we work on the budget, there are about 10 different calc tools that are on the VDOE website as we try to work through. But you can see in June, the VDOE predicted our ADM to be 7363.8. I won't read all those numbers to you. It was amended in March by the state to be about 7254. That was earlier. And having submitted our student record count, we have it as 7313. We won't know the official number until the state does their official work, but we wanted to produce both numbers for you so that you would see the difference. And you can see our state revenue. That was when we adopted our budget in June. And then you can see the effect of those two changes in ADM, which changes some of the funding from the state, and you can see how the budget decreased depending upon where the state lands, somewhere between 1.3 million or at least 977 million. So those two deficits are part of the reason why we are here. And again, this is preliminary because we just submitted our SRC spring number. Just to take a closer look at our revenue from the state and the VDOE calc tools, again, just so that people can go back and follow, I did list which calc tool I was using, the first one being June 2023, and then of course the most recent one, which is in March of 2024. But I think it's important to know, and I know that Councilmember Helgeson knows this because he is the financial wizard who is very well respected in terms of doing the budget. But when we get our state allocation each year, it's nice to say you're $4 million more, $3 million more. But as you all know, sometimes when that money comes, it has restrictions. So not every dollar can be used to do the budgeting in the way that we would like. Some of that money has restrictions. For our viewing public, and particularly my families, that's the same as saying, we give a teacher a starting salary of $47,000, but we know that all $47,000 is not available to that teacher to pay their rent, their mortgage, their food, all that. There are restrictions. They have to pay taxes and some other things on that. So we want to show some of the restrictions in the calc tool for you. We do have a handout because we recognize that this is small. So for the council, we did have a larger one that you can go through, and I am going to turn it over to Ms. Jamies to kind of go through that.
Good afternoon, Mayor Reed, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Although City Council is very well versed in the governor's calculation tool, I, being new to the district, am just becoming acquainted, friends, if you will, of this tool that the state provides. So while analyzing it, I kept going to the Lynchburg City budget and then back to the calc tool, Lynchburg City budget, back to the calc tool. So for learning educational purposes and for those of your constituents that may not be as well versed with the calc tool as the members are, I created the document that you have in front of you. If you will look at the document, the handout, I put the LCS adopted revenues in the calc tool format so that we could look line by line at what those revenues look like versus what the calc tool has. And it was very helpful for me from a learning experience. So I then, at that point, compared the VDOE ADM projection for 7,254.40. And then I looked at the third column, the SRC ADM, which is a little bit higher at 7,313.69. So I gave you a difference column. I was looking through it and wanted to see the difference between that. And I went ahead and selected the SRC column because that would provide us with more revenues than the VDOE projected column. So I did a comparison of that. So during this exercise, and for those constituents of yours that may not be as familiar with it, I learned that not all of these funds can go to general operating. So I added another column that gives you the funds that these actual revenues go to. Fund 1 can go to general operating. All other funds are in local government speak restricted. They're restricted for programs, they're restricted for activities. They can't be used in a select operational fund for anything other than what they are assigned by the governor. So I then said, okay, when someone, a constituent, looks at this, they see that amount and they're like, there's plenty of money there. I added a third section that backed out the restricted and gave you a net gave them a net operating amount that, that can be used for operations. So, that gives you the bottom line that you have. The restricted line started at line 49 on the second page. All of those funds are in a different fund and have to be backed out because they are specific to other items. So if you have any questions about the table, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, I'll turn it back to Dr. Edwards. So.
Any questions? Councilman Missions?
I have, I think, one glaring question looking at, what's been provided here is, I understand that there may be a shortfall in revenue, right? And you're coming here and asking us to produce more revenue, which comes from the citizens, right? And why aren't we looking at the expenditures as well?
And I'll go over that.
Okay.
Yes, was it?
Because that's the question I've got is,
Yes.
if we're,
Yes, that'd be
if we're
great.
talking about the money coming in, but we're not talking about the money going out.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
All right.
Yeah, well, it'd probably be better if we just take questions at the end. That way I'll hit
Okay.
all of your questions too. And just to be sure, we're asking for the LCS contingency that was set aside, which is different from the contingency that you all have.
Still comes from the citizens.
I know, but I'm just clearing up for my families at home so that they know which contingency we're asking for. The other thing that we talked about and shared with you was health insurance and just looking at the shortfall for our health insurance. And we provided you with the number, but we wanted to break down what the bills are for each of the months up until March. We still have 4 months to go with our health insurance. You will notice that the receipts, which is what we collect from the employees, increased from December to January because we did increase the employee contribution and that went into effect in January. So when you talk about what are some of the things that we were doing to kind of help ourselves, that was one of the things that we're doing. So we've seen 3 months of that so far, and we anticipate the rest of the months being there. But I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Jammies real quick.
Just real quick, another item that City Council is well versed in that the constituents may not be is the self-insured health insurance platform. So for those in the audience that is not well versed in it, LCS provides insurance opportunities to eligible employees for the cost of those bills that come in. Employees contribute as well as operational revenues contribute. As evidence in the chart, sometimes we're winners and sometimes we're not. So we currently have a trend in our workforce that has a select number of employees that are facing significant health challenges. And we wish nothing but the best for them. But 2 of our high-cost claimants, as I mentioned in a prior meeting, 2 of them, their bills come in annually at between $500,000 and $999,000. So we're getting $1 million health insurance bill. So it's significant. The chart that you're looking at is significant because we still have 4 months to go and get bills in. Couple of trend items I would like to go over, and I will be brief. In July, your receipts are down to $402,000. That reason is that is your 12-month employees. All of the other employees, the 10 and 11-month employees that are out at the schools, are obviously not getting paid that month, so those premiums aren't taken out of a check. So that is your core 12-month employees and what it costs in premiums for them. So another item that I would like to point out is in January that Dr. Edwards mentioned, your receipts went up to $1.3 million. That's not going to be a trend. There were some due-froms that weren't released from school nutrition that were released in January, which increased those receipts. A more accurate measure will be around $1.2 million a month where the school board enacted the increase to cover those costs. However, we all know that bills are going nowhere but up. So the volatility built into the self-funded platform, is evidenced from February to March where the receipts went up, the bills went up, disbursements, almost $420,000. That's a huge jump to maintain in health insurance costs. Also, another item to note, your disbursements for July were $943. Not all of your receipts for that month, $402, are the sick ones. Those bills come in 2 to 3 months later, so they're just hitting in July from prior months. So those are the significant items in that chart that I wanted to point out. Some strategies that we're doing, we're really pushing wellness. We're really pushing well visits, trying to do that prevention so that we don't get to the top 5 categories of, those top 2 individuals with $1 million a year costs. We're exploring options outside of the self-funded platform, but as we all know, health insurance is just exorbitant in cost. And we're also working with the LC consultants to potentially create more of an affordable employer option while not outpricing our employees, because the fewer employees that we have, obviously, the higher the cost of the insurance. So, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. All right, on to rationale number 4, which was the utilities bills. And I know that this was presented at a previous council meeting, so I wanted to go over this a little bit in more detail for you. So first column, you'll see what is budgeted, and gas is natural gas, not fuel. We'll talk a little bit about that. What was budgeted for the current year. Where we are right now, the actual 8-month period between July 2023 and February 2024, and the third column is a 12-month look back from the most nearest 12 months that we have, which would be from April 2023 through March 2024. A couple of footnotes. One, the previous attachment you have from July to February from the meeting from April, or the notice we sent on April 12th. But that 12-month look back, one thing I do want to just caution everybody is it does not include the full fleet of 25 electric buses yet. We'll see that as we move forward. So you won't see that in the electric bill. You may see an uptick in that, but of course you'll see a downtick in fuel, which is not on here for that. And again, we just used that 12-month look back and compared it to what was budgeted to give you a forecast of where we are there. You have in detail your third handout, or it says handout number 2, the actual bills from AEP in the various places, because there were some questions about the numbers. And I think last time we showed that consumption really isn't up. That is just the price of electricity that is up for that. The other thing is it's always hard to predict the weather. So our original numbers were done for our January 9th meeting when we did our projections. That was before we had winter, and winter was great because we didn't have a lot of snow or cold weather. And we still don't know what the upcoming months are going to be, because we could have some scorching days as well, which I am not a fan of. So do the best we can with that prediction. So just in quick summary across the top, there are those 3 numbers one more time. And again, we tried to use the lesser of the numbers, which are based off of the SRC ADM rather than what the state predicts. And I like to look at this as an iceberg because you can see what's on top, but we also need to look at what's underneath and some of the challenges that we have faced in terms of what's different from last year to this year that may be impacting our ability to address some of these issues. So that is the main issue. What we were suggesting that would be easiest is to take the remaining contingency reserve and put it against the health insurance. And you're probably saying, why there? Well, that's where most of our people are, our teachers and our staff, employee benefits. And then I just did a breakdown for you so you would know from LCS standpoint, we are about 84% people. And since we are people, that is the largest part of our budget, and that would be the cleanest. You can also track where that money goes. In terms of what we are doing to also help ourselves, so this goes to your question, Councilmember Mischens, we did institute a hiring freeze, except for very critical need positions, and that has been going on since about March when we did that. And by hiring freeze, I don't mean hiring more staff, I mean replacing staff. So our principals are like, my so-and-so left, can I replace them? We're like, hold up, we're at a hiring freeze. Even for next year, we haven't really started that because we want to make sure that we have adequate funding for all of our staff. A couple other things that you can see here, some purchase orders that were outstanding. We have canceled those if we did not absolutely 100% need them. We did cancel some of those.
Sorry, we have one question.
Oh, sorry.
I wanted to ask real quick, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So you're saying that if you lose someone,
Except for the critical need.
what's defined as
replacements.
critical?
Like a teacher or like a special ed teacher, any of our teachers if they're leaving in the mid-year. But if a teacher is leaving for next year and they've let their principal know, we have not gone out and started advertising for those positions because we want to make sure we assign existing staff if needed.
So I'll let it finish and then I'll ask.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Typically, in March, we start hiring for next year. So, and we pretty much are predicting these are how many first grade, fifth grade, all of those things that we have. So we have not done our full fledged of hiring in March is where we're at that hiring freeze. Some other things that we have done, overtime reduction plan for some of our folks that do get overtime. I think Dr. Woodica talked about our electricity and trying to keep that down, as well as we talked about we had already increased the contributions of the healthcare for our employees, and Ms. Jamie's talked about some of the healthcare savings that we're looking at in terms of switching our health insurance as that. So, okay, now take any questions.
Okay, questions? Anyone? No? Oh, Vice Mayor?
Help me understand why the rationale is then, if we don't get the extra money to keep these schools open, and we find the money, and we're voting on that tonight, by the way, that then you then tell us with these teachers leaving these schools, you're not lining up their replacement for this coming August.
I'm sorry, say your question one more time.
I think I was pretty clear about it.
Well, I don't, if I'm asking you to.
Okay, so
repeat it.
you just told us that you're not hiring replacements,
Not all of them for next year,
okay?
correct.
Except unless they're critical. And the argument was that we need 1.5, give or take, $1 million to keep these schools open for next year. And you just told us that you're not filling these positions. So we found the money to keep the schools open. I know they're two separate issues, but they're related because it's all budgetary. So help me understand for next year, as we're considering all these financial implications.
What am I doing? Yes, I can do that from a number of perspectives. So one, we have a reduction in force. So whenever you have a reduction in force, employees have rights that we have to go over. One of those things is whether or not we're going to try to find a space for them. So we are still making cuts, and we had discussed those cuts in January. We started making some of those cuts. One of the programs that was completely grant funded was the Virtual Academy, many of our teachers had worked in the Virtual Academy, so we brought them back. And before you start filling positions when you're under a reduction in force, you have to make sure that you find positions for your existing folks by using your protocols before you start advertising and filling. Because what you don't want to do, and we certainly would not want this to happen, is go ahead, start hiring for next year, and then if something major happened, and at one point we were discussing the closure of schools up until, I guess what's on your agenda tonight, but with that as being a question of whether or not those 2 schools may close, there are staff in those schools that I would have to place in existing schools. So I can't fill their positions before I'm absolutely sure that I've done right by our RIF policy. And I can share that policy with you all to go over that in more detail.
Any other questions? Councilman Helgeson?
So you handed us this, and maybe that's the other lady, where you had your previous budget. You know, I guess you have a bunch of numbers here that said this was the LCS adopted budget. So first off, we haven't had a budget. Normally, and I've showed this before to city staff, and I brought one with me last time, where we used to get a thick document that said, here is the LCS budget. Now we've gotten like spreadsheets and different kind of things, or PowerPoint presentations that talk about the needs. So, but when I see this number on the spreadsheet that was just handed to us, I see the number that was adopted that shows the basic aid of $23,577,000. All of these other numbers I have about almost identical, but that number I had a previous adopted of $22,240,927, which means the basic aid increase was closer to 1.62 million more than budgeted. I know you're talking about, well, the sales tax receipts have gone down, okay? Some things have gone down, some things have gone up. So when sales tax goes down 1.2 million, but basic aid goes up 1.6 million, when the supplemental compensation goes up about another 400,000, when there's the all-in money for another 3.7, which there's another 2.6 million for at-risk, to me, that looks like it's a little bit more than, you know, and again, we're first looking at 2004. So it seemed like lots of those things were very, and then I heard, you know, the ADM, what's her name? I'm sorry, the new CFO. Son. Yes, if you can come up to the, I got a question for you. You mentioned about the difference on your spreadsheet that you made.
Yes, sir.
The ADM versus the VDOE estimate. So where did that ADM come from, the 7313?
So the VDOE came from what they call the caboose.
Totally get that. So
That
where did the one that you've saying you're hoping it goes by?
The VDOE came from the governor's calc tool.
Got that one.
The SRC, the student record count, is what LCS, looking at their schools every month, what their sends to VDOE, and VDOE does a calculation and reduces some of their unallowable students out, and then turns it around in the calculation and provides us with what they think the projected ADM is going to be.
So the ADM that you gave to them after counting the students every day
Yes,
since,
sir.
you know, the beginning of the year up until March 31st, you then submit that, and that's
Yes, sir.
normally almost probably to a student. What is paid for by the state?
Yes, they go in and they have their own formula that they back out certain
So the
segments.
VDOE is the estimate. So VDOE estimates, but you do the actual count.
Yes,
So
sir.
when the actual count happens, that's then what's actually the actual ADM where the state pays.
Well, no, sir. They go in and they do a formula and a calculation, and they average out and back that out and actually give us revenues on what they think it is, not what the students we actually have in a classroom.
Okay. So they are going to lower that from what you actually, so I lots of these numbers that I think we got, I thought we saw something that you said the ADM was 7,400. What was that email? Or was that, we had an email that was sent when I asked the question. What wasn't that like?
Yeah, so I can handle that one. Taking that
Okay.
ADM question. So in terms of, and for folks who don't know, average daily membership, in terms of ADM, and I think in my letter to the city manager to you all, I tried to explain all the different ADM calculations. So monthly in LCS, we have our own enrollment and all the things, taking attendance. And we get a calendar for the month, and we get an internal ADM. It does not include, it's not the formula that VDOE uses, it's just, here are the children that are in the seats. We do it two ways, with our Hutcherson pre-K and without. So when you're asking us for ADM in December, that is the only place that I actually have. I'm going off our monthly internal ADM. And going forward, we'll be real clear when we answer your questions that this is where that number is coming from. On March 31st, the March 31st count is what we submit to VDOE. It's called the SRC, Student Record Count. They do that 3 times a year. They do it in the fall, they do it in the spring, and then they do it in the summer. The summer is more for summer graduates. But it is that March 31st number that VDOE uses and says, okay, they put it in their formula, they do their calculations, and then they give us back. This was the actual ADM for 2024, and that is what our final state revenue is based on.
So when I asked the direct question, and then you emailed back a direct number, what was that number is all I'm saying. Have you found it?
Depends on when you ask me.
Well, no, I
so
asked it for
might
the
have been.
ADM, so.
This is the ADM for fiscal 24.
4, yes.
I've got
Yeah.
a document from me, but it's going to take me a
Yeah.
second.
It was fairly, I can pull it up, it was the email that you sent, and it was fairly high up on the, very
You should
early.
have
in the-
answers to all your questions in
Yeah.
that actual letter.
There's been a lot of back and forth on ADM. I'm trying to
So,
make
so
sure.
with that number, I'm just, again, off the top of my head, remembering like a 7,400 number. And I thought, oh, that seems a little different, but,
It's probably from our monthly count, which doesn't do any VDOE subtraction, so. But again, going forward, so that we're all on the same page, if it's coming from our monthly count, which really means if you're asking me in January, how many kids are here? That's coming from our monthly count. It is not what the state does with their formulaic account. I can't even reproduce that for you. So if not, I will always just stick to whatever the state predicted, which is at the beginning of the budget season, or what they look back at and say, this is what your actual count was with that, so.
While they're pulling up the email, just for clarification, so adding up the different shortfalls that you outlined between the state shortfall, the health insurance shortfall, and the utilities, that roughly is about 4.3 million-ish, correct? And what you're asking us to do is take the 1.6 million that you have in contingency that you were allotted in last year's budget and move that over into instruction, so you can apply that towards what you're choosing to do is put it in instruction to pay towards the health insurance shortfall to help cut 1.6 million in essence of that 4.3. And then all the other things that you've listed that you're going to be doing, including the hiring freeze and so forth, is going to be what you've now applied to
Internal costs.
basically try to fix and balance your budget so that
Yes.
you're clean and tidy for the end of '24. Is that summarizing it? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
ma'am.
Summarizing it all for everyone out there?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you find it yet?
I don't. Here it is. Questions from Councilmember Helgeson on April 10th, 2024. Please request the best estimate of the March 31st ADM from LCS, if not the official actual. And the answer was, as of March 31st, the K-12 average daily membership for Lynchburg City Schools for the 23-24 school year was 7414.86. And this does not include the 361.05 pre-K students, which would bring the total number to 7775.
So with that, I was right. I mean, so just a little bit ago, that ADM was 7414. Now I'm seeing a different number, about 100 kids less than what was.
So at the time that you asked your question, I used our internal monthly
So that- but that-
ADM, which does not do the VDOE calculated formula. As of May, when we're doing the March 31st, we don't do the March 31st SRC on March 31st, it's sometime later. We did the March 31st SRC, we submitted it, we went through all the errors and checks. That is the number that we got back as our potential March 31st ADM from VDOE. It is going to go through one more check. So you and I may have this conversation again when you say, why is it not 73, whatever that number is? Because VDOE is going to double check it again when we do the end of the year SRC, and they go back and they double check everything again, and they will tell us what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the average daily membership typically, what I was asking you for, which I think was the actual count, which I put in there, which was after the March 31st.
It's after the date of March 31st, but
Yes.
it's not after the VDOE opens up the SRC so that we can submit it and get it back with the number that you are requesting. So
And
if
the ADM is critical because that's what's funded.
absolutely.
And so when we're seeing numbers that are all over the map, that doesn't bode much confidence in a
I-
governing body that is saying, hey, let's allocate more
I
resources.
agree with you, council member, which is why I said going forward, we all need to know where is the number coming from, because even in a
I've been asking
confidence
for this
level,
for-
the VDOE predicts our ADM and then later gives us another one based on the changes over the school year. So
So I understand that with VDOE and their estimate, but you're actually counting them every day. That's why I waited till after the end of March 31st to say, what did you actually count? Do you have the estimate or did you have the actual count? So anyway, with
an
that,
actual count is different than the ADM that the
you're
VDOE
actually counting
does.
them every day and then dividing.
Yes, we are. That is
Yes.
our monthly calendar. So if you want, what do you see in your classrooms every day, and you want the monthly count, I will say, this is the monthly count. It does not subtract out any formulaic things that VDOE does. These are the number of children. But if you want the actual, what is the number for which VDOE is funding you at, then I will say I have to wait until we submit the SRC so that I don't give you misinformation, which is apparently what may have happened due to the confusion, but not intentional. So, but now we all are educated and we know.
Yeah, I guess this has been happening, this isn't the first time, this has been 4 or 5 years, so I'm seeing this spreadsheet again for the first time. I'm seeing the fact of the previous basic aid looks vastly different than what I have for the adopted budget for 2024 by the tune of 1.6 million. I'm looking at, some of these other requests. I recognize they may be critical. I think Greg Patrick had done a presentation for us that the ending 2024 revenue from the state may be different than that 67 million, correct? I mean, we got two things here we're kind of have the balls in the air. We have the 2024 and we have the 2025 budget that we'll be talking about later tonight.
Right, I think the biggest difference in revenue in '24, from a summary standpoint, is governor's budget came out, and then the General Assembly, and then you had your special session budget. Special session budget, which was the final budget, it looked great at first glance, right? Looked like we were gonna get a lot more money. And then there was a a category in there that was called all-in, right?
Yep.
And that all-in money was a big chunk, like 3.7 million, something like that. And that all-in money can only be used for tutoring or tutoring adjacent items, right? So when you take that all-in money out and you compare what was in the governor's budget that was fungible across basically all uses versus what was in the final special session budget, which was fungible across all uses, I think there was actually less money available to schools by a small amount.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, without getting into the minutia of the individual lines, which I certainly can't do right now, that was my general takeaway from doing the comparisons. Now, what that didn't take into consideration is any changes in ADM, which is obviously going to have some impacts, you know, where the final projection was versus where the actual was. That could create a fairly substantial swing, but an apples to apples comparison using the same ADM numbers, there was actually less fungible money for schools in the special session budget than there was in the governor's budget, which was pretty surprising when we first ran that.
And that's why the ADM was so critical. That's why I kept asking those questions, because, you know, I think you had a presentation and we looked at some of these numbers. When we thought the ADM was going to be a whole lot less than presented, then that means there's more money, like 6,000 to 7,000 more per child contributed by the state. So I guess seeing all this and hearing all this, I know we're looking at this, we're talking about this today. This didn't help any, especially when I just asked a question not long ago. That number came out with 7414. Today it comes out 101 kids less. It's for the same number.
It's not the same process, Councilmember
Well, it's the same, it's
Helgeson.
ADM. I mean, it's ADM.
It's not the same process. I can't
ADM
let
is
you
exactly
mislead-
the same.
No, it's not. The ADM that the Virginia Department of Ed does, they apply
There's
their
their estimate. I said,
formula.
what is yours?
So if, ours is just
Gotcha.
counts of
Okay.
students in our schools, is what you
Totally get
asked
it.
for.
Thank you very much. So with that now, then the question is, some of the other issues. So I don't think that is a bona fide issue with regarding the reduction. Now, the other issues with regarding the health insurance claims. Now, that's something different. I think that is a place where we could have a legitimate, you know, conversation. Some of these other items, the water and gas rates that soared with it, I don't understand that either from a budgeting standpoint. But the health insurance claims are things that are vastly different, that those aren't things that can be budgeted. So that is, I think, where the conversation should lie. These other things, again, lost confidence, absolutely lost confidence, hearing about ADM, that was vastly different, hearing about water and sewer rates that supposedly went up 25% per year, which absolutely did not happen. But the unknown is the health insurance. And maybe Donna, I don't know if you can help, the health insurance reserve of schools. How is that handled? Is it same as the city where we have, or is it vastly different? Help me understand
It's
how.
different.
Yep.
The city has a fund that we put money into from employees and the city that pays our health claims. They do the same. But the reserve that's sitting on the city's books was actually put there from return of fund balance
Yep.
funds. So the city has a reserve, a separate reserve for our healthcare claims that we've had to dip into on bad years. And so the schools ask us to keep some of their reserve for their return of fund balance in a separate reserve in case they had similar issues. And so that's why
So-
they're
so-
asking to use, those funds
To
in
add more to the
25's
reserve.
budget. Yes.
So that's the 25 or the 24? We're at the 24 here.
Well, the 24, they're asking to use the contingency funds that is separate from the reserve funds.
Yep.
But the reserve funds, they're asking to use, right, in 25, $1 million in 25.
So the 24 is what we're dealing with, the contingency.
But that's not the reserve for health insurance claims.
I thought I was hearing that the reserve was getting mighty thin because of all these extra claims. The projection is going to be mighty thin, so therefore we should add some of this contingency for the 2024 budget to the health insurance reserve.
They have not dipped into their health insurance reserve. They have to have council action to do that. So instead of dipping into that for '24, they're asking to use the reserve that was established in the budget and have that moved to their instruction line so they can pay claims. And then in '25, they requested the $1 million be moved because that's going to continue based on critically ill staff and dependents.
So now regarding, the city, we have the risk management department. Who does their health insurance? For the reserve portion?
That has nothing to do with risk management.
Right. Okay.
The health insurance is,
But for our stop loss and.
yeah,
isn't that-
we do that. We have a Blue Cross Blue Shield Anthem claims. We share
plan.
in
Yep.
some of the same features of those programs, but it's done through Human Resources and Finance.
Okay. And so with that, we still have the stop loss claim. So once
Yeah,
it
there is
exceeds.
stop loss.
So they're the same as how the city's is.
Yeah, but it's like $350,000 is the number off the top of my head.
Okay.
So if you have enough, yours is 400,000? Okay, and ours may be right now too, but that's the last number I remember. But if you have enough of those, you're in serious trouble.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I have a question back to the ADM number, so I am curious. So, because I trust that you know how to count the number of children in your school. I believe there's enough people that are smart that y'all know exactly how many number of children you have on a daily basis. So you kept saying that the formula that the VDOE uses deducts some of those children. Can you explain what that is, what scenarios that is? Are those foster children? Are those, what does that look like for me?
Yeah, and I actually went on the VDOE to try to follow and see where that information is. There is a very detailed sheet that is part of the SRC that talks about different students depending upon special education services and things like that. I can give you the sheet because I don't want to misrepresent.
Okay.
That has all of the, at least the parameters for the deductions for what VDOE is doing.
Yeah, because it's interesting to me. Your schools know how many people are in them on a daily basis. So if the VDOE has a reason for deducting from that, there's obviously some reason for that calculation, which is interesting. And if they have, obviously they have logic behind it, but it's interesting that those numbers would be different consistently in what they're looking at. So
Yeah. I think just because they use the numbers as a basis for a funding formula.
Right.
Not necessarily like you need to feed these children. That would be different if I underestimated that or whatever services that those children needed. So since it's part of a funding formula, it makes sense to me that they would do something like that. I just don't understand all the intricacies.
Right, and it hurts you and helps you throughout the year, because if the numbers are up, then you end up getting more funding. When it goes down, it takes away. So it can be beneficial or to a detriment either way, so.
So in the past, what we've always done is just go with whatever VDOE projected, right? So this is what we project you're gonna have that. At the end of the year, we kept our budget on the projected number. When we submit SRC, if our enrollment is up, we end up getting additional funds from the state, which would make our fund balance higher. And I know that has been a problem in past when we've come with excess fund balance. So it's been kind of like, where do we land in terms of, do we use the VDOE projected number and run the risk of, we have too many students, now we have too much revenue, or do we use a projected number like the SRC number, try to get in the middle so we at least look like we're meeting funding goals to the best of our ability that would work for you all, so.
Got it. Any other questions? Councilman Helgeson? Missions?
I'll take that as a compliment. So I've got a couple questions here. and I think I share some of the concerns that we've heard, but how many CFOs, and this is nothing against you because you're brand new, right? So welcome aboard. How many CFOs have we had in the last 2 years?
2 years.
3 years?
Two in an
3.
interim.
2 in an interim. So that we've had a lot of turnover at that position. You know, I'm looking at the Brown Edwards, the letter for Lynchburg City Schools from last year's comprehensive annual financial report, and you know, they pointed out that there's issues with reconciliations and financial reporting. And it says, we suggest management implement procedures such as monthly reviews and reconciliations of account balance for accounting implications, periodic comparison of estimates with actual results, and consideration of other accounting policies for appropriateness. Where have we gotten on that?
Well, I think one of the things that we did, at least in looking at this year's budget going forward, is have my team meet with Donna. We got Donna and her team on speed dial. Actually, they went and helped us with looking at the utilities to make sure that we were budgeting those appropriately. So we trust them, and they're always just a phone call away to kind of review that information. We've also, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how restructured our department a little bit better to have some checks and balances so that we don't have some of the concerns that have been raised.
Yeah, because I mean, that's,
And it's one of the reasons why, if you notice in all my letters to you, what I like to do is give you, where's this information coming from? What the source is, so that there's no miscommunication, and especially if we're taking something off of VDOE or off of your documents or our documents, we can all shore up and say, is that accurate? And ADM is a perfect example of why numbers might look different based on what we count in the school and what actually goes into the VDOE system and comes back. But just being clear about where is this information coming from. That helps Donna's team get in there and check quickly for us as well.
well, and you know, it's interesting, you just mentioned your letters and the source information. And I just got the response today about the TC Miller question that I asked, when was that? Thursday, I think, in an email. And, you know, one of the questions that I specifically pointed out, obviously the demographic study is outdated by a couple years now. But I don't even see where you even told me this year how many
I believe your question was
local zoned TC Miller students there were. So, I mean, it was just.
Oh, I have that information too, but I thought your question you asked was specifically about
What's it looking like for next year?
the number of applicants if they were lower, and there's an answer to that because I told you how
We don't know
many.
yet. That
No,
was the
that
answer.
wasn't the answer. The answer was the number of, not actually. Oh, come on up, Amy. Miss Pugh has that because she calculated that. And we also know how many kids are zoned and out of zone. But I also gave you a clarifier that when kids are at different schools, it's not as simple as all of these kids are zoned and then all of these kids are SFI invited. There's some other conditions and reasons why students might be at a school that's not their zone school, and I listed those in the letter as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now.
Sure. For this current school year, as of today, there are 195 students at TC Miller. 107 of those are invited and 88 of those are zoned. Last year, TC Miller applications were 91, and this year they're 48. Of the 91 last year, there are eligibility requirements that they need to meet, and only about 50 of those 91 were eligible. And then this year, of the 48, there are about 35 that are eligible, and so far 23 have accepted their invitations.
Got it. Yeah, and I was just,
And it's really hard for us to predict for next year what that's going to look like, because we've got students that are moving, throughout the city over the summer, changing their zones. We have families that request placements, special placements for us. So we may have families that are zoned from T.C. Miller that have babies that are hardship request or a superintendent placement request. So it's really hard for us at this point to predict how many students will be enrolled at T.C. Miller, and then how many of those will be zoned versus invited. Now, over time, the invited students build up, because it's not just the number that were invited that year. It's how many have been there. Some have been there since kindergarten, some have only been there for a year.
yeah.
So.
And all the students, sorry, Ms. Pugh, but just so folks know, all the students that are in K4, the assumption is, unless there's a parent request or they move, that all those invited students, they just stay there and move up. So we don't recount them. We only go with open seats, which are usually, most of our open seats are in K, because that's the incoming grade level. Occasionally, there'll be a couple seats in other grade levels, and the principal will share that with us in terms of what seats are open. But we do, once the children are in, as long as they're doing what they're supposed to do, they stay there until 5th grade.
I ask each of the principals each year for our schools for innovation and our year-round school, Bass Elementary. I ask them, just to look at their current enrollment, look at trends over the past couple of years, and in December, early January, I ask them to give me predictions of how many seats they'll have open at each grade level. And as Dr. Edwards said, this year, I think at T.C. Miller, she had allotted 15 seats for kindergarten. And then I think for first and second grade, there were only 2 seats that she had available. I think for a total of around 30-some seats
31.
that were available for this year. So, sometimes the schools have fewer spots open than they have, applicants.
And, looking at some of this as well, because there was also the 11 resignations you received from T.C. Miller, right? Would those be examples of frozen positions, so to speak, until you move? How's that working?
Yeah,
Because if we have 11 resignations at T.C. Miller, and earlier you told us we have a hiring freeze, I'm just curious how.
So those, depending upon the position, we've already placed some teachers into those positions, open positions, that we had teachers from the virtual academy, so they've taken those positions. But once we get past this, probably this meeting, we can go ahead and start predicting how many spots we're going to have. I think the big question is, I just need to be sure 100% that we are not closing the schools, because if we did that in the fall, which is something that had been talked about, was it when we did our October meeting, we projected closing in 2025. So normally, closing in 2025, I'd be hiring right now and scooping up all the best folks for Lynchburg City Schools. But when there was a question mark as to whether or not we were closing in 2024, there are teachers in those buildings that we absolutely don't want to lose, and they would have to be placed, which is why you can't hire for those positions. But if we're moving forward, we are not closing, I'm going forward.
Yeah, and then, do you have any idea where we stand right now with the total, with the total staff and number of positions? Do you have any idea what that looks like
For
next year?
in the division,
What you're planning for, yeah.
I don't have it on the top of my head, but as people are retiring, resigning, I think I gave you guys a link to the school board agenda. You can see that the last one that we had more retirements and resignations. So we typically, again, we would have been filling since March, but now we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. But we're about to get out there and make sure that we have our classrooms set.
Because, when you look at the numbers over the years, some of this stuff just really doesn't seem to add up. There's got to be a source for where the money's going. And when I look at Table 30 of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, what I see here going from 22 to 23 is an increase of about, I don't know, 185 employees.
Is that
From 22 to
inclusive of
23.
grant-funded employees as well? Because we did get a couple grants.
But not for 185.
LCS Restore, and our virtual academy staff were also in grants, as well as some other staff. So I don't have what you have in front of you, so I can't.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking broad overall, when we're talking about spending the citizens' money, we need to be very prudent about what we do. And, when I see this, 185, and went from 1,317 total employees to 1,498 from fiscal year 22 to 23, that's 185. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not using a calculator for that. And that's, it almost seems like it's kind of a self-inflicted wound, so to speak. Are we trying to, is this like, are we trying to keep these positions on board that were grant-funded positions or that were supposed to be temporary? Like, what's, you understand what I'm asking?
I'm not sure, but I'll give it a shot. I will say once we were in the pandemic and we returned to 5 days as opposed to the hybrid schedule that we had, and one of the things we were seeing and one of the things you were hearing is behavior, and children were just struggling. So as a result of that, and also in conjunction with the change in semi-Medicaid and all the things that happened with our day treatment. So the year prior, the number of students receiving day treatment had gone down, and that was due to funding and changes beyond our control. And then we have children who are showing significant behaviors or more behaviors than perhaps they had in the past. That requires a people solution. I can't think of a textbook or a pencil or anything that's going to fix that in a school. So that's where we have some of our staff. That the birth of LCS Restore was in direct correlation to what we see with behaviors. Not suspension doesn't work for our children. I mean, we can kick them out of class, but we still have to educate them, and we still have to work with them and train them to make different decisions. And that's what you saw with some of LCS Restore, some of the behavioral coaches that we have hired to address some of those student needs. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I see that, and that concerns me, and it's, and then you mentioned LCS Restore. I've heard from several teachers that kids that really need to be in LCS Restore aren't getting in it.
You're exactly right, because it's a pilot and we only have it for some grades because we are being prudent with our funds and only use the funds to pay for the portions that we could do. And also same thing with the virtual academy. While this is great and wonderful to do right now, either A, we're going to have to figure out a way to build this into our budget, or B, we're going to have to drop it when we get to what people are calling now this fiscal funding cliff with CARES. I will say, if you polled us way back in 2021, did anybody predict that that our kids would need this amount of mental support, mental health and wellness support? I don't think so at that time, but we are definitely seeing it now, and not just in Lynchburg, but everywhere. They're seeing that kids are just struggling. So
do we have full-time mental health practitioners on staff with Lynchburg City Schools?
we have them in LCS Restore. We've got contracted services as well. Much of that we also have with grants. So we have grants that are paired with our existing programs to help out. So whenever we can write a grant to get money and help ourselves, we do.
But these are, so we actually have.
We have contracted services with mental health providers in our schools.
Do we have any government employee mental health practitioners in Lynchburg City Schools?
We have BCBAs and staff at that, but do we have any clinicians that are government employees? I don't think so, no. All the people who have the actual license to treat, I think are from the outside.
From the private sector.
Our BCBA is probably our best, most highly level educated person.
I know we just went a lot of different directions. I just have a lot of questions. And I don't think we're going to get them all answered this afternoon, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Dr. Wilder?
Thank you so much for your time, your resources, and preparing the spreadsheets for us to kind of clarify certain questions. Really appreciate that. I know it took a lot of time for your efforts and your staff putting it together and work with our city staff as well. So we really appreciate that. Thank you for continuing to work together with our finance team for all those numbers. That's such a challenging time, and trying to keep them all straight. I was looking at my package and trying to keep it all straight. It is challenging. So for those who prepared it, I really appreciate you for all the spreadsheets, trying to make it as clear as possible. I appreciate that. Just so I can be clear, and I'm gonna go back to ADM, I'm gonna ask one more question. When did they give you, when did the VDOE give you the projected ADM number?
The projected one for the upcoming budget is usually in the governor's budget. So when we got that first governor's budget in December, we had the projected ADM there because all the funding is tied to that, and then we go from there.
And then when does the final one come?
I think after we do the end of the year, and I have to go back and actually look at the date. I want to say it's August that we get the final, this is what your final previous year's budget or revenue was. So, but I will look and make sure that I give you the exact information.
But again, you mentioned that the ADM changed because we have our numbers, our daily numbers for our kids. But then VDOE has their own method and policy and practice of how they calculate what the actual ADM is.
Yes.
So I know this is challenging trying to predict what they're going to do. It's probably like if we had a crystal ball, we would crystal. But if we had a crystal ball, it'd be a little different. Then we could project it even better. But thank you for the information. Thank you for clarifying all these points. I had several other questions, but most of them have been answered. I know we need to move our agenda along for the next part. But again, thank you for your efforts. I know it's challenging with working with our kids and healthcare and health issues. And I'm in the school system pretty much every day and work with kids every single day. And I see the challenge you do. I'm not going to talk about one issue, but about kids from in our neighboring communities, what he called our athletic director. So we get a piece of it, and you get it all day. And it's going to take all of us, our village, working together to help our children. But again, thank you for your efforts, and also thank you for being prudent with the taxpayers' funds. I mean, working on making sure we're concise, making sure we're saving funds, making sure those temporary programs you have, whether from the Restorative Academy or whatever, using the proper funds, trying to meet all the needs of our kids. Because think about the school system in a community of our nature, a public school system, you have to meet so many needs. It's not a cookie-cutter approach. It's so many needs in our community and so many challenges for our children. So thank you for doing your best to meet the needs of our children, all of our children, because all of our kids have special needs, special conditions. I have 5 kids in my house, and every single one of them is different. One from making all A's to one making all F's. So it takes a variety of approaches to meet that, and it's just in my house. So I can't imagine what the other 7,000 kids have to go through. So thank you for your efforts. I really appreciate it. Bless you. That's all. Thank you.
Just one quick question. If this, so we heard the arguments of why and whatnot. So what happens if we don't allocate these funds? We decide to roll it over so there can be a little more of a cushion for next year's budget.
Well, then we have to go to my back page and just find other places that we're going to cut. But I just want to remind everybody that we are about 84% people. So cutting stuff doesn't make a dent. It's really in people, and people translate to services. We made some cuts last year. We did some reduction in force.
So this is for 2024 is what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So 2024, we're now
This is the
March
current
15th, almost, March 14th. And the fiscal year is going to end fairly soon, right? Month and a half?
Yes,
Yeah.
June 30th.
So what happens if this is, because this is an allocation in 2024.
Correct.
So what would happen?
And, well, I'm hopeful that you all, and with the help of Mr. Patrick, so thank you for at least explaining that when we were appropriated our budget in June of 2023, when we were real happy about getting millions more, and then we were told 3.7 million of that is for ADM. We also heard this council say, we're going to keep this in reserve in case you need it. We need it, right? We need it. So we're here, and trust me, I don't think any of us wanted to be here. We wouldn't be here if we did not need that. And we're trying to show you where those changes happen. We're trying to be as transparent as possible, give you all the data you've asked for, give you links. You could fact check us, please do. Go back and look at those numbers. But the bottom line is what we adopted as our budget, what we built our budget on, has changed. Just the revenue side has changed. The all-in, which, by the way, we were adopting our budget in June. All-in started in September and October. So it was all in after we were already in. So those changes, and we had kids in classrooms by that point. So we've done what we can do, and as you all said, we will hold this in case you need it. It is May that we're like, okay, here we are. We've done a lot of things up until this point, but now we need you.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on to the comprehensive plan update. Ms. Rachel Fresheisen.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. As the manager said in his overview, I'm here to talk with you today to give you an update and let you know just how we are progressing on our comprehensive plan effort so far. You'll recall that we started this process last summer when we held a kickoff meeting in the Miller Center and during August 2023. Following that, we did a lot of data gathering that includes evaluating our current plan, creating a community profile, which includes information about kind of who we are and where we are as a city, meaning demographics, socioeconomic data, population growth predictions. Interviews with city departments were also conducted during that time. Since we last saw you at your retreat in December, we have completed our public engagement process through these avenues listed here. A survey was available to the public from October of last year until March 1st. We had 257 participants in that. The survey was conducted both electronically and in paper form, and that was advertised on our website, the city's social media pages. We also distributed some flyers and postcards at events. The paper copies were available at our library and at our neighborhood centers. An interactive map was also available on the plan website, which is lynchburgtogether.com, where users could make suggestions based on a physical location within the city. For example, a user might indicate things like a potential recreation area or a trail connection, an intersection they feel may need improvement, that sort of thing. At last check, that map had 68 suggestions. In-person public workshops were conducted in November and December at 4 elementary schools within the city. These workshops were conducted as charrettes, where we had a short presentation about the process of what the comprehensive plan is. Then we held a virtual poll and group work sessions at tables arranged by topic, such as transportation or economic development, et cetera. Participants worked as a group to reach consensus on those questions that were provided, and then they recorded their answers on a map and a worksheet, and at the end of the session, a facilitated discussion was held with each group reporting out their discussion and findings out to the larger group. During this time frame, we also participated in the budget engagement pop-up sessions with our finance folks and our city manager's office staff to spread the word about the plan and talk about its importance for the future of the city, and also to encourage participation in the survey. And to wrap up the public input, we also held 8 focus groups where we were able to bring together and have discussions with some of our community stakeholders. These were very valuable and provided the team with a lot of insight, and we got to talk more in depth about topics like economic development, mobility and transportation, community facilities and services, and education and workforce development with the companies, the nonprofits, the groups, the relevant stakeholders that are out in our community doing that work. Some of the biggest trends that have come out of the public input are listed here. Overall, people feel generally pretty good about the city, pretty positive about living here. Moving forward, we've heard that these things are going to be very important for our residents as we look to the future for Lynchburg. And by all means, this is not an inclusive list. It can't include everything, just some of the bigger things that we've heard so far. Economic development being one of the top priorities. There were several comments that were complimentary of our Office of Economic Development and Tourism staff and the good work that they are already doing in our community. Looking ahead, our residents are hoping to see additional commercial growth, industrial development, and just things to stimulate our economic growth and create job opportunities in our community. Next is housing, or I could say housing, because we've heard so many times that there is a pressing need for additional housing of all types here in Lynchburg, and that is across the spectrum, from single-family homes to more middle-density options like duplexes, triplexes, row homes, townhomes, up to higher densities as well. We're hearing there is a definite need for housing from our various stakeholders. Employers especially noted that they need they need places for their people to live, for their employees to live, and that is something they take into consideration as they look forward to their own future corporate decisions. Public safety and crime reduction was also a top concern. Really no surprise there. I think that's a top contributor to quality of life in any and every community. City schools were also a popular discussion topic. Participants noted that public schools are an asset and an important component of what makes a community strong. When people are choosing where to locate, when employers are evaluating where they should expand, public schools play a key role in those decisions. Infrastructure came up quite a bit as well. That includes our public assets, such as water, sewer, solid waste management, and transportation network. People feel generally pretty positive about where we are and the facilities that we have now for where we are, noting that future investment may need to be made in some areas. It was also noted that public infrastructure improvements can often spur private investment as well. So we consider all of that to be phase one for the comprehensive plan process. Phase one is really about data gathering and public input. Now we are transitioning into phase two, which is plan drafting. And that is where we really get into the meat potatoes of what we've heard so far and trying to coalesce all that together and put it into something that works for the community. So Planning Commission held their first work session a couple of weeks ago on May 1st. That was more of an introductory session about, kind of plan framework, our community profile, and our public engagement summary. The next work session will be held July 11th at 3 p.m. Additional work sessions will be held in September, November, and January. Once the draft plan is complete, it will be available for the public next spring. We're targeting March 2025 for that, in anticipation of public hearings for adoption the following summer. I'll also take the opportunity here to mention the plan website for anyone who is listening either in this room or on LTV or on the live stream and wants to learn more. They can visit lynchburgtogether.com to follow along in this process. Again, that's lynchburgtogether.com. That concludes my summary of what we have done so far. Thank you, Council. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Dr. Wilder?
Thank you for the information. We appreciate it. And thus, thank you for the efforts in going out to the community to hear, so everyone can have a voice. I've seen you all over the place. I think I've been to a few. So thank you for that. I mean, even when we did the Parks and Rec study, that they went all over our community getting the input from our citizens. So I really want to commend the staff for doing that and making sure that all the voices are heard, going to every possible area you can. So I really, really appreciate that. I'm so thankful that our city is listening to our citizens. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. The citing agreement for 3920 Harbor Street and 109 Old Trents Ferry Road. This item will appear before council for action on May 28th, 2024. Mr. Tom Martin.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. If it pleases you, there's actually two citing agreements. If I could just discuss them all at once.
Okay.
That'd be great. So the purpose of a citing agreement is really to mitigate impacts and provide financial compensation to address those impacts to the locality. Please keep in mind that these siting agreements are separate from the revenue sharing ordinance that will be on your agenda tonight. These are really one-time cash payments or other items to address impacts. So they're totally standalone. The first site that we're talking about is at 3920 Harbor Street and 109 Trents Ferry Road. If you remember back in April of last year, council approved a conditional use permit of James Energy LLC to allow the construction of up to a 20 megawatt facility. And just a reminder, these battery storage facilities essentially take energy off of the grid during low consumption, store it, and then during high demand, it's loaded back up to the grid. And I imagine they sell it at a higher rate when they upload it. So the Code of Virginia does allow for these siting agreements, and depending on the underlying zoning, the impacts that could come from that on any of the facilities is obviously emergency response, right? These facilities have a certain amount of risk associated with them, whether it be fire, chemical, whatever. There's also, like the Harbor Street property is zoned residential, so using this property for a battery energy storage, it's lost housing opportunities. The other side is industrial, so there's lost job creation opportunities. So we met for a period of time with Chris Myers from East Point Energy, who's with us. There he is right there this evening, and negotiated the siting agreement for the Harbor Street property. And what would be involved is within 90 days of the agreement signing, if you authorize the manager to sign it, there would be a $5,000 cash payment. When they start construction, there'd be an additional $10,000. And also at commencement of construction, they would allocate $30,000 to Lynchburg Fire Department for the purchase of specialized equipment, which I believe they're looking at some type of hazardous material drone. I did speak with the chief about what their needs were. And then after operation, there'd be a $10,000 payment for a total of $55,000 for this project in cash payments to the city. With the exception of the $30,000 for LFD, the remainder would go into the general fund. So in addition to these payments, East Point Energy has also agreed to fund and provide specialized training to our fire department for those types of response that might be necessary for these types of facilities. And just again to note, these one-time payments are separate from and in addition to real estate tax that is normal, and also any proposed revenue sharing that you're considering this evening. This one will come before council on May 28th of this month. Moving on to Carroll Avenue, different name, same people, just a different LLC, same reasons why we're doing this. This one's zoned industrial, and it's permitted by right, so it doesn't require any type of special council approval for this one to go in. Since this is zoned additional industrial, they're offering a little bit more in cash payments, up to $65,000 for this site. And again, it's separate from in addition to other revenue streams to the city. This comes before council on May 28th as well. So that's a brief summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Councilman Helgeson?
One quick question. When I hear cash payments, I'm just mindful of a few years ago when there were like cash proffers. How is this different?
This is specifically allowed by state code, and according to Tom, this isn't according to me, I believe it's a way to encourage localities to approve these energy storage facilities.
So kind of like a cash proffer does the same thing, isn't it? Or that's
Kind of, but It's not the same, but yes, it is kind of the same.
Good thing you followed the school administration. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? No? Okay,
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Okay, moving on, the VA 250 Local Committee. This item will appear before council for action on May 28th, 2024. Mr. Ted Delaney.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Mayor,
Hello.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of City Council. The United States will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and our founding as a nation in just 2 short years in the summer of 2026. There are now national and state commissions planning and leading what is called the semi-quincentennial anniversary, which believe it or not, has already officially been underway for several years. America 250, the national multi-year initiative leading to the commemoration in 2026, is the national multi-year initiative. VA 250, or Virginia 250, is the state equivalent established by the General Assembly in 2020. VA 250 is actively encouraging each city and county to form its own local committee. Several interested citizens have already coalesced and have organized as an informal committee, but according to the VA 250 Commission, the local governing body or city council must adopt a formal resolution to certify the group. Certifying a local committee makes it eligible to apply for state grant funds for anniversary projects and makes Lynchburg eligible to receive traveling exhibitions and teacher resources from the state. So staff is recommending that City Council establish the City of Lynchburg's official VA 250 local committee, to be known as LYH 250. Following the usual protocol, this item would appear for a vote by City Council at its next meeting, May 28th, 2024, under the general business agenda. The proposed resolution designates Old City Cemetery or Southern Memorial Association to serve as the fiscal agent for any grant funding for projects or programming that are awarded to the local committee. And as you know, the Southern Memorial Association is the local 501c3 nonprofit, which currently operates Old City Cemetery by contract with the City of Lynchburg. Lastly, the proposed resolution automatically dissolves the committee at the end of 2026. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you all might have about the proposal.
Any questions? No? Oh, Dr. Wilder?
Thank you for the information, appreciate it. Now, if persons are interested in joining the committee, how about they contact your office, or how does that work?
Yeah, they are welcome to contact the museum. They can contact Old City Cemetery or any member of the group, any DAR chapter, SAR chapter, Poplar Forest. A lot of people know about the group, and anyone who's connected to any of those organizations can connect them.
And I'm on the Poplar Forest board. So you also work with them as well? I know they're working with some projects as well, also Monticello.
Yeah, so Poplar Forest is already on the Bedford VA 250 local committee, but they're very interested in being on our local committee in Lynchburg as well, so they'll be on both.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to roll call. Dr. Wilder.
Okay, came fast. Maybe sometimes start at the other end. But again, I just want to find my notes. There's a mental health summit on Saturday at the Jubilee Center. We talk about all the mental challenges in our community. It's going to be Saturday at the Jubilee Center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's always free, open to the public. There's some great door prizes as well. But with all the mental health challenges in our community, we need to encourage persons to attend the event. It's a variety of persons that are sponsoring the event. I'm just the location holder, but several agencies are coming together to sponsor this event. So it's a mental health summit on Saturday from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Also, at the Police Memorial on yesterday, a beautiful memorial event. Mayor did a proclamation. So, and also, Vice Mayor was there as well. Several, I think Councilman Taylor was there as well. Several others probably were there. But again, I want to thankful that the event was beautiful, the singing was amazing, the speaker was great. So I'm glad for our community and the city staff working together, put all those chairs and have that beautiful, it's a beautiful, beautiful day to have that event on yesterday. And we'll continue to pray for our community. I know we had another death of a young man. We want to really continue to pray for our community and pray for more love in our community. That's why we need to have more mental health situations, and we can see how we can bring some healing to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Dolan?
I have nothing.
Councilman Helgeson?
Yes, this last weekend, what a great, their 51st year in their graduating class, record number at Liberty. 50 to 60,000 people came into town. You know, I know in our minutes, we have an approval of an item that says, look at the economic development for, you know, people coming downtown with the string of lights coming up at Christmas time. But look at the real economic development. When 50 to 60,000 people come in, fill up our hotels, fill up our restaurants, and did it so fantastic. What a great, it was fantastic to be a part of it. Great time, great event. It's sad to see these students that have done so well leave, but new group is coming. Also on Saturday, a great event, as Councilmember Wilder stated about another shooting. Peacemakers had another rally on Saturday, which was fantastic. Our Congressman Bob Good came. We had a great event of folks that are really trying to figure out what to do downtown in Ward 2 to make sure that we have cameras up, make sure that we have other eyes in the street, you know, privately funded cameras, of course, looking out for folks and looking out for making sure that their community is safe. They came together very nicely, a great event, and so thank you.
Councilman Mischins?
I was also at the event that the Peacemakers held, and I can't really add anything else to that, but it was a great event, and it was, you know, really great to be down in that part of our city and just seeing people come together, you know, with a common theme of wanting to take their streets back, you know. One of the things that's interesting when you think about what's happened, Morrison Street, Wadsworth, Kemper Street, Main Street. I think I got those right. Those four streets were all the streets where we've had somebody murdered this year. They're all in Ward 2. Every one of them. So to see folks in our community being proactive about that and pushing for things like conflict resolution training and actual responses that the citizens can do, you know, putting doorbell cameras up and then talking to citizens about sharing that when they see something, things like that. I really think that's it's helpful. It's nice to see that proactive approach to trying to keep each other safe in our community. That's all I have. Thank you.
Council Taylor?
Yeah, I agree with the violence in the city, and I think we need to stop pacifying criminals. If we had a law in our city that make use of a firearm, just the use of a firearm in a crime, a 10-year sentence off the bat, that would help. That would make people think, if I grab this firearm and go outside my house to shoot someone, I'm going to jail for automatically 10 years, and that even before you go to court. Not that you can't have a firearm in the city, but we have to make the penalties so harsh that people will think about what they're getting ready to do. And I also like to ask city manager and your blessings on your father. We thank you for the example you're showing, strength. You're here with us, okay? And also, we need to figure out a way to help all the people that would have benefited from the international festival. We can't let a group of people stop our citizens from earning income on an event. So we need to bring it back and bring it back as strong as possible this year, because those people lost revenue. So we need to do something for them. Bring it back and let them make some revenue. The city will benefit from it, if we can. Thank you.
Councilman Feraldi?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Councilman Taylor's point, that was one of my items, but I don't think I could say it any better. So I'll skip to some others. It's National Police Week, as was noted. Last night, what was that last night? It was last night. It was a very, very moving ceremony, and it's become one of my favorites in my time on serving on council, and it's highlighting those who are putting themselves in harm's way to protect our way of life. And it was a very good ceremony, and I'm thankful that we continue to have it. One of the other weeks that we have, I'll take a personal moment of personal privilege, I guess. Last week was National Nurses Week, and my wife is a nurse, and I've never imagined some of the things that she has to see as every day in the medical field, and so I have just come to an immense level of respect for those in the medical area, what they do, and how they also are on the front lines protecting our community. It's with that in mind I wanted to highlight, I believe it's this Thursday, there's going to be a parade at Centra to honor our healthcare workers, and I would encourage folks to attend if you can. And then finally, there's been just a lot of athletic success at University of Lynchburg. I don't know if folks have been tracking that. Please go back and look, whether it be baseball, track and field, I think lacrosse as well. I mean, there's been just a number of championships and events that have been won by the Hornets, and it does need to be highlighted. So I commend them on their success and wish them best of luck, as at least the baseball team is playing again for the national championship. So go Hornets. Finally, I am very much, and I just got notified that the parade has been canceled for Thursday, so never mind. Anyhow, strike that from the minutes. Finally, I do want to thank the city manager and staff for working with me on Enterprise Drive. The residents at the summit continue to make that a priority, and the surrounding neighborhood. I look forward to our update at our next meeting. There is a request for that area to continue to be a priority. You can't get into Windhurst without going through one of two counties. So we can't forget that it is a city asset, it's a city neighborhood, it's a city community, and I want to continue to stress that to us and our neighbors. And I thank you. Look forward to it next week, our next meeting.
Thank you. Agreed with everything that was said tonight. Our police week, our ceremony last night, our memorial was beautiful. We appreciate all of our police officers that have served, continue to serve, and the sacrifices of their families. I attended my first AARP event last week. I was asked to speak, but I am 1 year short of being qualifying as a member, and they've been sending me things now for like 10 years. So they're really excited about me joining the club. However, it was called the Scam Jam, and it was actually a very educational event, and I want our citizens to know about it because you could be scammed at any age. You don't have to just be retired or a senior citizen to be scammed, and they're getting more clever each day. And that was the purpose of the Scam Jam, was to educate our citizens about the different fraud and scam efforts going on out there. And the AARP actually has some really great information on their website where they educate you on all the new scams that are going on every day. and the targets that we have all become, and then you can report them, you can learn about them, and figure out a way to protect yourself and your loved ones from the new scams and fraud target ways that the frauds out there are targeting us. So I learned something, and when I am a proud member of the ARP, I will bring all of you with me. So also, as we've talked about, unfortunately, some of the recent crimes in the area, and we look at, again, I've spoken about it before, the ages of many of our the people who are committing these crimes. A lot of them are young. And one of the things that you've heard me talk about that I've been working on for the last year, and the coalition that was founded, and some of our efforts to try to target our youth. One of the things that we are working on right now is a midnight basketball program that we're going to have a pilot for this June. So mark this on your calendars at the City Armory starting June 14th. So Friday, June 14th, June 21st, and 28th. For 16 to 22-year-olds at the City Armory from 10 to midnight. We will be launching our first midnight basketball program here in the city for targeted for our youth to get them off the streets and hopefully play some fun pick-up basketball games for teams of 5, and we'll be advertising that all around the city. And there's different organizations that are helping us put that together, but the Parks and Rec Department from the city of Lynchburg are one of our contributing sponsors, so we're super happy about that. So I'm happy that we're able to do that, and hopefully it'll be really a great program that we can build on from the summer on.
You may have to suspend the curfew, I guess, then.
Well, it's in June. I think that's our sunset is June 1st.
No, we extended it a year.
No, we didn't extend it a year. We extended it 6 months. So it's correct? We extended it.
We'll be back before you in June to decide whether or not you want to continue the curfew, or was it May 28th? So actually at your next meeting, May 28th.
If we wanted to extend it, but as it sits now, the expiration on the sunset on it was June 1st.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Okay. With that said, the highlighting of the Clerk of Council office is who we'll be talking about tonight. The Clerk of Council office is pivotal to City Council operations, facilitating smooth proceedings and fostering transparent communication with our residents and internal stakeholders. Throughout the year, the clerk diligently records and preserves the discussions, decisions, and actions taken during our council meetings, averaging about 45 meetings annually. The meticulous upkeep of our city code is yet another vital responsibility shouldered by this office, with approximately 100 legislative pieces passed each year. Charged with notifying the public of meeting dates, agendas, and actions taken by the council, the Clerk of Council office ensures that our residents are informed and engaged participants in their local government. The public comment process underscores the Clerk of Council office's commitment to fostering civic engagement and inclusivity within our community. With over 100 public commenters annually and a significant increase observed last year of over 230, this office is dedicated to managing these processes, ensuring every voice is heard. The office's responsibility extends beyond the council chamber. The clerk manages a diverse array of council-appointed boards and commissions, overseeing the application process and appointment terms for over 150 positions across 25 boards, processing about 75 applications a year. This administrative support is essential in ensuring the effectiveness of these bodies in serving our city. In addition to these core duties, the Clerk of Council office manages over 60 recognitions and proclamations each year and provides invaluable support to our city council members in their official capacities. So thank you to our Clerk of Council. With that said, well, yes, we will give her a round of applause. And with that, we are recessed until 7 p.m.